Welcome back. This deep dive is for all you soldiers out there. We're getting right into it today, talking leadership, specifically ADP 622, Chapter 8, Leadership in Practice.
Absolutely. We're going deep on this one. It's about understanding what makes a good leader, especially when things get tough. Think of it as your essential guide to leading in the heat of the moment.
Exactly. No need to take notes or anything. Just listen and let it sink in. And what better place to start than with a quote from General MacArthur himself? He said, "But once war is forced upon us, there's no other alternative than to apply every available means to bring it to a swift end."
Straight to the point, right. That statement really highlights the weight of responsibility for leaders, especially in large-scale combat. You've got lives on the line. Every decision matters.
It's about having the courage to make tough calls, even with the risks. And the chapter illustrates this with a powerful story. The 3rd Battalion, 358th Infantry Regiment on the Mulman Line.
Right, right. Intense fighting, heavy casualties. But they persevered. Talk about grit. That's what we expect from our leaders, facing down fear and doing what needs to be done.
And it's not just about physical courage in battle, is it? The chapter talks about the importance of moral courage, too.
Exactly. That inner strength to admit when you're wrong, to speak up even when it's uncomfortable, that's how you build trust and earn respect as a leader.
The chapter also tells the story of the Remagen bridgehead, an incredible story, capturing that bridge under fire, knowing it was rigged to blow.
Talk about initiative and guts. That's leadership in action, seizing the moment and achieving the impossible.
These stories of courage, they really highlight the difference between leadership and management, which the chapter talks about next.
Hmm.
We tend to use those terms interchangeably, but they're not really the same, are they?
You got it. They're both about guiding and giving direction. But management is more about order and efficiency. Logistics, resources, processes, keeping everything running like a well-oiled machine.
So if management is about keeping things running smoothly, leadership is about choosing the direction.
Exactly. Leadership is about inspiring people, navigating complexity, and adapting to whatever comes your way. And the chapter really stresses the need for adaptability in today's world.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Sticking to the same old playbook when you're facing new threats, well, that's just not going to cut it.
It's about being comfortable with uncertainty,
Ah.
thinking outside the box, knowing when to improvise, that takes practice, and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone, which leads us to the next important point.
And the chapter really dives into the challenges leaders face today. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
You're telling me, think about it. Technology is changing faster than ever. We've got the media on overdrive, and then there's joint and multinational operations. It's a complex world out there.
Not to mention the whole geopolitical landscape. The chapter talks about how important it is for leaders to understand the bigger picture, the different cultures, the players involved.
Right, it's a globalized world. Today's battlefields aren't always so clear-cut. Leaders need to be sensitive to different cultures, especially working with allied forces. What works one place might not fly somewhere else.
When in Rome, right.
Exactly. Adaptability is key. You got to build bridges and maintain those alliances. And you can't talk about navigating this new world without mentioning technology.
For sure. The chapter talks about how technology can be a double-edged sword. They use the example of GPS.
Yeah, amazing tool. But what happens when it fails? You can't rely on technology too much. It can create vulnerabilities.
That's a good point. Leaders need to be ready to adapt if the tech lets them down. Fall back on their training and experience. Think on their feet.
Resourcefulness, that's key.
Yeah.
But it's not all about gadgets and gizmos, right? The chapter also talks about the human element, especially when it comes to stress.
Absolutely. Operational stress is a real thing. And the chapter emphasizes that leaders need to recognize the signs, not just in their soldiers, but in themselves too.
Burnout, compassion fatigue, it can happen to anyone. Self-awareness is crucial. Leaders need to take care of themselves, seek help when they need it. It's not weak, it's actually a sign of strength.
And it sets a powerful example. Taking care of your mental health is important. The chapter talks about the resources available, operational stress control teams, behavioral health.
Exactly. Those resources are there for a reason. Leaders need to encourage their soldiers to use them. But let's face it, not all leadership is good leadership. The chapter talks about this thing called counterproductive leadership.
Yeah, this part really hit home for me. They define it as behavior that goes against the Army values. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Those values are the foundation of everything we do.
Absolutely. Counterproductive leadership undermines those values. It creates a toxic environment. And that can be devastating for morale, for trust, and ultimately for mission success.
It's like a disease spreading through the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And the chapter doesn't hold back on how much damage it can do.
And it's not always as obvious as, yelling or being abusive. There are different types of counterproductive leadership. Some are more subtle. You've got your abusive leadership, sure. But there's also self-serving leadership, erratic leadership. Even incompetence can be counterproductive when you think about it. And then there's corrupt leadership, which is a whole other ballgame.
It makes you think, right? Leadership isn't about power over people. It's about empowering them.
Yeah.
But how do you actually combat counterproductive leadership? Seems like a tough thing to tackle.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. But the chapter gives us some ways to approach it. Starts with self-awareness. Leaders got to be honest with themselves. Brutal honesty, even. Am I living up to the Army values? In everything I do, am I creating a climate where my soldiers feel respected, valued, like they can speak up?
Holding yourself accountable every single day.
Exactly. And it's not just about reflecting on your own. You got to be open to feedback, willing to change. But it's not all on the leader either. The chapter also talks about how important it is to build a culture where counterproductive leadership just isn't tolerated, period.
Where soldiers feel like they can speak up if something's wrong without fear of, repercussions.
Absolutely. It takes guts to stand up to bad leadership. But hey, courage is one of our core values, right? We don't leave anyone behind. And that includes protecting each other from toxic leadership.
This has been, wow, a really thought-provoking deep dive. So as we wrap up ADP 622, Chapter 8, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think it's this. Leadership isn't just something you read about in a book. It's real. It's in the decisions we make every day, the actions we take.
It's about living those Army values, having the courage to do the right thing, even when it's hard, and being able to adapt to whatever gets thrown your way.
And don't underestimate the impact you have on the people around you. Whether you're leading a small team or a whole battalion, your leadership matters. It sets the tone.
It's about inspiring others, motivating them to be their best, creating that environment of trust and respect, and accountability too.
Because in the end, leadership is about service. It's about something bigger than just us.
Well said. On that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We hope this gets you thinking, gets you talking, and inspires you to be the best leader you can be.
Remember, leadership is a journey. Never stop learning, never stop questioning, and never stop trying to make a difference.